How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm on the back of about, I think this is interview 7 or 8 this week. So I'm on the back.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm just trying to get a bunch done before Christmas and I can get back to my book. So I've got them all waiting in the wings.
okay, that's good. I hope you
Yeah.
can hear me okay.
Yeah, you're fine coming through loud and clear. How about this side?
Yeah, you're fine. Yeah,
Oh, great.
absolutely.
Great. Well, listen, I know we had a little catch up the other day. In fact, I've been desperate to speak to you for a long time. And ever since I've seen some of your stuff online and heard about your exploits. Yeah, I know that we're both fans as well of Percy Fawcett and other explorers like that. And I just thought, well, look, I've got to chat to William and debrief him of
Okay.
everything that he's picked up on his travels. And I'm so happy to have you here in front of me today.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
Okay, well, that's great. I just thought we'd start for people that might not know you or might not know a lot about you with
Hmm.
how it how it came to be. How did you get into the genre, the cryptozoology genre, and what was that turning point or that clinching point? There's always something for somebody that seems to drag them in. What was it for you?
Well, I think it happened when I was about 12 years old. I was in my grandmother's house in Scotland, in the town of Stranraer, where I'm from, on the west coast, the southwest coast, and I was watching an old black and white movie adaptation of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World.
Hmm.
And that kind of fired my young imagination about the possibility of living dinosaurs. And from time to time, you'd see things in newspapers or magazines about exploits like this. And I would go to the library and devour books on dinosaurs and monsters and things. And it kind of just went from there. But nothing really grabbed my attention until the early 1980s when I began reading reports about the Mokele Mbembe. Reports would surface from time to time in newspapers. There was no internet back then, of course, and so you had to wait until a newspaper printed something, a snippet of information, and then from there, I learned that by this time I'd moved to London because it was the only place where there was employment by 1982. And it was there that I learned of a conference at Brighton University with the International Society of Cryptozoology. So I went there with a fellow called Mark Rothermel. He and I both went to the Congo together in 1985. And it was there that we met Roy McCall and J. Richard Greenwell and Bernard Heuvelmans and Tim Dinsdale. And meeting them and chatting with them and getting to know them was really something. And I mean, these are, of course, among the founding fathers
Hmm.
of cryptozoology. So getting to know them personally was really something. I mean, back then they were in their 50s and their 60s. I was 27, and now I'm in my 60s. So time really flies, believe me,
Really
when you
does.
get past 30. But yeah, I kept up my correspondence with Roy Mackall up until he passed away, and also with Tim Dinsdale, who invited me to his home after my return from my first Congo expedition. But I don't want to get too far ahead of the story. But I devoured with great interest reports of Roy's two expeditions to the Congo Republic, and also a report by Herman Regusters, the jet propulsion engineer from Pasadena, California. And there was a number of problems with his report that I kind of unraveled. I know that if you remember way back in 1983, the Congolese zoologists Marcelin Ananya
Hmm.
claimed a 20-minute observation of Mokele Mbembe. And but again, having been to the Congo and been to the village of Boa on the Likwalo River, which serves as they are the kind of regarded as the owners of Lake Tele. It
Uh-huh.
was there that we began to uncover information that threw a lot of doubt on the claims of Herman Regusters and Marcelin
Oh
Ananya.
wow.
Yes. But no, I wasn't there with Augustus. He did claim several sightings of what he called a long-necked member. It's possible that he and his wife, Kia Regustus, when they were paddling around the lake in their inflatable boat, might have encountered a Mokele Mbembe, the neck and head coming out of the water briefly and looking at them, then going down again. That could have happened. But when he claimed that he and 22 other people simultaneously saw the neck and head moving through the water, we could not find a single eyewitness from the village of Boa that could verify that. In fact,
Wow.
22 members, people from the Boa village, including the vice president of the village, went with him to Lake Tele, and they all denied a lot of what Herman Augustus was reporting. Now, they did hear the roars or the very loud vocalizations of a strange animal that couldn't be reconciled to any large known African animal. I have that recording, I think a cleaned up version of that recording on my YouTube channel, Crypto Hunt. But again, with Marcelin and Anya claiming that 20 minutes, again, we couldn't find anyone that could verify that. And when we went out onto Lake Tele ourselves in 1986, we found that the location in the lake that he claimed the animal was moving around seemed a little bit too shallow to have a hippo-sized animal with a long neck. On discussing this years later with Roy Mackall, Roy believes that Marcelin saw a large specimen of the giant African freshwater turtle called the Trinox triangus, but he just didn't want to admit that. And I think he probably embellished the story of observing a Mokele Mbembe to try and attract more money and scientific expertise to the Congo. But one thing that we found when we were at Lake Tele was the reports of these animals come from, or rather emanate from the northern part of Lake Tele. There's a number of water channels called malibos that merge with the swamps towards heading west towards the Bai River. And you can make your way through those water channels to the lake from the Bai River, but it's an awful lot of work because you have to hack your way through fallen trees and log jams and all kinds of things. But when we attempted to explore that part of the lake, the village elders would absolutely not let us go near that area because it's taboo. This is where Mokele Mbembe was speared to death by the Bangombe pygmies who lived in that area back in the 1960s. What is so interesting about that report is that in Mfondo, at the mission station where Gene and Sandy Thomas, American missionaries, had their mission station, they had two very elderly pygmies living there at the time who described to us the killing of that Mokele Mbembe. They were there. They described the killing of the animal, the strange noise it made when it was being speared to death. And they were very young at the time. They were children, but they were there when it happened. And they described this strange kind of cry the animal was making when it was being speared to death. But being children, they did not participate in the feast. And when the animal was cut into slices and the meat was cooked, and everyone that ate of the meat of the animal died shortly after. That is one of two reports that I have of a long neck, long-tailed, bulbous-bodied animal being killed and consumed by villagers. And the other report happened in, I think it was in Cameroon. But the one thing I can tell you is that we came away with the distinct impression that Mokele Mbembe is a living animal, but it's rare. It's semi-aquatic, it's rare, it moves around a lot, so there's no one place you can go all the time and see them. And we found years later, we went back in 1992, that was myself, and a lady called Elizabeth Addy, who's an optometrist from Yorkshire. And we just went there to take medical supplies and things to the mission station, and we went on a river trip, mainly to do medical assistance work in the villages. So we missed Boa the second time around because Boa village became a flashpoint at that time. In spite of the fact I made many friends there, after us, I think in 1987, a Japanese expedition went to Lake Tele. And they again hired people from Boa to take them there. And there was a fellow who went with them that's known to me. He works for the Ministry of Forests, and his name is Jose Borges, and he was the deputy to Marcel Ananya. And he told me later that the expedition saw this sort of a hump moving through the water, but no long neck. So that hump could have been anything. It could have been a stray hippo.
Yeah.
It's unlikely at Lake Tele because there are no hippos anywhere near that area. So it could have been anything, but it was a sizable animal. But the Japanese ran into all kinds of problems. Okay, now when Herman Augustus returned to the United States to a big press conference, and he was telling everyone just what a great explorer he was, and all these discoveries he made at Lake Tele, and one of the reporters got a little bit impatient and said, "Well, you said you got pictures of the dinosaur. Where are the pictures?" And he said, "Well, the camera didn't work in the humidity, or it fell in the water, or something like that." And the man threw his clipboard at him like a frisbee. And later he was on a talk show. I think it was a morning talk show. Again, giving this big speech about how he was this great explorer and endangering his life looking for this dinosaur that was chasing them around the lake. At that particular time, the missionaries, Gina and Sandy Thomas, were on furlough in the United States, and they were watching the show, so they called up. They called in. It was one of these telephone chat shows, and the announcer said, "Well, we have a phone call coming in from the Reverend Eugene Thomas, his wife Sandy, missionaries to the Congo," and Herman Augustus refused to take the call.
Wow.
Because everything I heard about him from Roy McAll, from Gene Thomas was less than complimentary.
Okay.
But he wasn't the first Westerner to reach Lake Tele. A Frenchman went there in 1976 to do some scientific work of some kind, probably collecting insects, because they have a lot of rare insects around that area. And so he didn't make any reports of anything large, strange, unusual there. But it's a tough place to get to. It takes you're marching through the forest for 5 days to get there. So and you have to camp down a couple of times in the night. It's a very dense, large forest. So it's really a very challenging place to reach. Now, going back to the Japanese expedition, the villagers of Boer, by the way, were not paid by Herman Augustus. He did not pay them the money he promised them and left them. And of course, we went there shortly after him. So it was very difficult to get their trust. Now, after us in 1987 were the Japanese. A number of the Japanese expedition were literally held hostage at Boer village, while one of the Japanese members of the team was sent back to Brazzaville to get more money, to pay this exorbitant amount. So this ended up reaching the ears of the government, and so they sent the military up to Boer village. So they sent 40 heavily armed troops to arrest the chief of the village of Boer, to basically teach him a lesson, to make him understand he's not running an independent state, And so to remedy this situation in the future, the Congolese government decided to make Lake Tele and the surrounding area a national park of special interest. And so now you can still go there, but it's now a national park. And so you don't have one village or one chief controlling the whole area and extracting money from people. I always wanted to return there a second time. It's just so tough getting there. But switching to Cameroon was very fortuitous, because a lot of reports coming out of Cameroon about what the Baka people call the Lakila-mbembe. This, it's just like Mokele Mbembe, except much bigger, has thick armored scaled body and the dermal spikes running the length of the head, neck, and tail.
So this is morphologically different in some respects.
It's morphologically similar to the Congolese Mokele Mbembe, but much bigger, and with much more morphological features being described. What I find intriguing about that is these reports come from the Baka people. They're commonly referred to as pygmies. And they hunt and fish and go into very deep parts of the forest and the river system. Now, we did not know that sauropod dinosaurs had these dermal spikes. running that until 1991, when a fossilized diplodocus was discovered. I think it was in Texas, and the skin impressions were beautifully preserved by the rock, and you can see these dermal spikes running the length of the head and neck. And now we know that more than one type of sauropod had them, and some sauropods had armored bodies, and so on. And so these descriptions by the Baka people were very accurate. Now, they live in these little mud huts, these cone-shaped huts in the middle of nowhere. And, you don't see any satellite TV dishes outside the pygmy huts, and there's no flat screen TVs inside. They don't read National Geographic magazines. They just describe to us the animals that they see and what they know. See, to them, the Lakila-mbembe is just like any other animal, but it's much bigger, and it's very, very aggressive, and they don't like it. It has what they call a bad spirit. So there's nothing mythical or magical about it to them. They just don't like the animal. Unlike the Aka pygmies of the Congo, they're quite open about their information, because the Aka pygmies in the Congo believe that if you speak openly of Mokele Mbembe to outsiders, then great misfortune or even death will come upon you. Whereas which made information gathering somewhat difficult in the Congo.
Of course.
But in Cameroon, it was not like that at all. They are happy to tell you everything they know about these animals. They just don't like them, and they're kind of puzzled. Why do you want to go and see them? They're very, very aggressive animals, And this is why you don't see any hippos around where the Lakila-mbembes or Mokele Mbembes are said to be present. And I know that in 2008, when I went to Cameroon with a film crew for the History Channel, they had one of the guests on the show was Donald Prothero, a geologist, and generally a skeptic. What miffed me a little bit was he said that Mokele Mbembe is most likely doesn't exist, and the people there in Cameroon, well, their perception of reality is different from ours. And I was a little bit taken aback by that, because he's not speaking from a position of knowledge. I mean, he's never been there. That's when you get these people to say, well, the vast majority of scientists don't believe Mokele Mbembe is a living animal. Well, the vast majority of scientists had never been to the Congo Basin. They'd never explored the area. They'd never spent any time with the people, getting to know them. And but there has been through history a handful of Westerners who have seen the Mokele Mbembe for themselves in Congo, in Cameroon, in Zambia, in Zaire, what was used to be Zaire. So we do have those testimonials, because if Mokele Mbembe was a mythical animal, it would only be confined to one particular tribal group. It wouldn't be so widespread, and that's why. I don't know if you've got a copy of the Mokele Mbembe handbook. It's on PDF. That's why we've identified 15 different tribal names.
Wow.
For an animal. The descriptions are the same throughout the Congo Basin and throughout Equatorial Africa in general. But each tribe has a different name for the animal, but the descriptions of the animals remain fairly consistent, which tells us that they're talking about a real animal, although it is rare. It is dangerous, it's semi-aquatic, it moves around a lot. So it's a bit like looking for a moving needle in a haystack.
Absolutely. And William, just to go into the sort of the topography, the environment in which this animal lives, I mean, it's vast, it's impenetrable, even for those people like the Baka pygmies and the surrounding residents of that area. I mean, they don't live really, really deep in the forest, these people. So I would imagine that's where most large animals would reside, away from people that are going to hunt them and perhaps take ill to their presence. I mean, what's your information on the way the environment is there for explorers such as yourself? What are you facing?
Well, it doesn't matter what river, whether you go on the Sangha River, the Ubangi River, the Tebek River, the Bai River, or go to Cameroon to the Bumba River and the Ja River. These are hundreds and hundreds of miles long. They're very broad. They're very deep, especially in the wet season. They can get up to 40 feet deep.
Wow.
But they recently found that the Congo River has areas that are over 700 feet deep.
Wow.
That's a river. That's as deep as Loch Ness. Yeah. And so when we get information about crocodiles 50 or 60 feet long, I mean, there's so much area where these animals can hide. I mean, the forest is and swamps are seasonally inundated during the wet season. During the dry season, we discovered that the animals dig out caves in the tall, muddy banks, and they retreat inside the caves, and then they basically bung up the cave, except with a little air hole at
Okay.
top. And we found caves like that there. So the area is overall, if you're looking at just the Congo Basin, it's 1.5 million square miles. And so it's absolutely vast. So if you're talking about a small but viable breeding population of sauropod-like
Mm.
animals scattered around in that area, then not just them, but also the horned animals. They call it the
Mm.
Emele Ntouka, killer of
Ah,
elephants in
yes.
Congo,
Yeah. Yeah.
or the Ngoubu in Cameroon. Again, there's vast, vast areas of forest that
The
they can
Ngoubu,
hide in.
what does that look like? Is that more of a stegosaurian type of animal, or is that the Mbielu?
Okay, the Ngoubu, that's the Baka word for it.
Ah.
It's a four-legged animal. It's as big as a forest elephant. It has armored body and it has between 4 and 6 horns protruding from its head.
Hmm.
Some of them have a neck frill. There's the river and Gubu. When we showed them pictures of extinct animals, as far as the river and Gubu is concerned, they picked out the Arsinotherium as being most like the river
Oh,
and
wow.
Gubu,
Okay.
because paleontologists now believe that the Arsinotherium was in fact semi-aquatic,
Oh, wow.
like a hippo. And
Yeah. Yeah.
now that's interesting. But in the Congo, they speak of the animal, the Emele Ntouka, killer of elephants, as having a large horn made of polished ivory,
Mhm.
and that is very aggressive. It will ambush and attack and kill elephants. And in fact, the Herman Regustus expedition, did find 2 dead forest elephants on the banks of the Likwala-Osur River, but the tusks of the elephants remained intact. So this was not ivory poachers.
Okay.
But both elephants had these large abdominal puncture marks in their stomachs. And recently they found a massive dead elephant in Zambia, again with its tusks intact, but with these large abdominal wounds. So
Wow.
I'm discussing this with Roy Mackall. He thinks that the river Ngoubu could either be an Arsinotherium or some kind of hitherto undiscovered aquatic rhino. Because
Wow.
there's three or four different types of rhinos in Africa, but none of them can swim. So this may be a specialized a rhino that's
Mm.
adapted to an aquatic environment.
Wow.
Um, and as for these other animals with the neck frills, they do sound like, um, I guess, the horned dinosaurs. But when my Cameroonian colleague Pierre Sima, he went to a village which borders Cameroon and the Central African Republic in November 2000, after David Wetzel and I had been in that area, and they had shot one of these animals
Wow.
for food because it's a terrestrial, and they butchered it up for meat and everything. And because I left him with my binder full of illustrations, and they picked out the Tarbosaurus as being a dead ringer
Wow.
for the animal that they shot, and they say they see them in groups of 2 or 3, sometimes 2 adults with a young one. But again, the savannah is a vast area. And so I think if you want to explore these areas thoroughly, you need to have 3 expeditions on the go all at once. One exploring the forest, one exploring the river and swamps, and the third team exploring the savannah. But
Wow.
all this takes time, it takes organization, it takes money. My French colleague Michel Belot, his wife is from Cameroon, and he has a lot of good family contacts there. He's been out there 25 or 26 times already, and he's determined to get to the bottom of the mystery. In
Mm.
fact, he's been successful in finding these huge 3-clawed footprints, very deep in not just the sandy but also the stony banks or shingly bank of the Jar River, and it was clearly made. These prints were clearly made by a very heavy animal indeed. And in fact, he's
Fabulous.
found tracks belonging to different animals that French zoologists could not identify. So this is a veritable lost world in a way.
Mm.
The Jar River, going up the mid-Jar River, and the forest to the west is a gold mine for any zoologist. But most secular scientists will not accept these stories or these reports of these unusual animals unless we have a specimen or the remains of a specimen to present to them. Otherwise, they're just going to sit in their institutions and their universities and their libraries and say these animals don't exist, which I think is a very short-sighted perspective.
So, from that perspective, I suppose you probably agree with somebody like yourself as well. The citizen scientists play an integral part in discovery, in the possible discovery of new creatures. What surprises me, William, in this world is that we seem to believe that we have discovered everything. You know, you open Google Maps and you zoom in on an area and you think that you know it, and yet there's so many vast areas that have been untouched, unseen by man. And I'm sure that one or two hangers-on, one or two prehistoric survivors could certainly eke out a living in such a vast area. Now, talking about the Congo, the Congo Basin, it's great that there could be such creatures as the Emele Ntouka and Mokele Mbembe, but there were also giant spider reports from that area. And I believe you went.
Yes.
Is it the Jabba for Fofi? How do you say it?
The name of the giant spider in Cameroon is Jiba Fofi. Jiba means great or giant, and Fofi is their word for spider. And so the thing, I picked up a report of giant spiders from Marguerite Lloyd, who lived, I don't know if she's still alive, but she lived in Bristol. And her parents, Reginald Lloyd, R.K. Lloyd, and her mother, Margaret Lloyd, they were living in what was then Rhodesia. And they were kind of like an adventurous couple. They decided when they got married in 1938, they'd go on this motoring holiday through what was then the Belgian Congo. And so they were driving down a jungle track that had been widened to take motor vehicles. And they saw this creature crawling across the road in front of them. And they stopped to let it pass. And they thought it was maybe a large monkey in all fours, but they got a shock of their life when it was like a giant spider, like a tarantula. And so Reginald, he was trying to get his box camera out, and he was shaking with excitement so much that the thing scuttled into the forest. And so when I spoke to the missionaries about this in the Congo, they speak Lingala quite well. And so the Congolese word for giant spider is Mobali Elulu. That's Lingala. Mobali, it means great or giant, and Elulu is spider. And I put a giant spider presentation on my YouTube channel, which covers giant spiders from all over the world, including the UK, believe it or not, and also Papua New Guinea and the southern United States, which still has a lot of swamp and forest, and giant spiders are reported out of there from time to time. So the giant spider, which may be the same as the one in Cameroon, in Congo is called Mobali Elulu, which is Lingala. And in Cameroon, it's called Jiba Fofi, which is Baka, the Baka language. Now, when we went there in 2000, David Wetzel from Concord, New Hampshire, and I went there to basically find out if Mokele Mbembe were known in the river system there to the people. They didn't just confirm that to us, including the horned animals that look a bit like the horned dinosaurs, but also I asked about the giant spiders. And the pygmy chief, his name is Timbo, said to me through an interpreter, he said, if you'd asked me that, if I forgot to ask in 2000, we were back in 2002. And it was then I remembered to ask Timbo, the pygmy chief, about the giant spider. And he said, well, if you'd asked me that when you came here 2 years before, I could have taken you into the forest and showed you the lair of a giant spider that was living near the village. Oh, I could have banged my head off the ground. It's a golden opportunity missed. Now, these spiders can grow anything from 4 to 6 feet. And they, of course, the skeptics say, well, the pygmies are making a mistake. Well, they're mistaking them for tree-climbing monkeys. Well, again, all you're doing is insulting the people that live there. They've been hunting and living there for generations. And
as if they don't know the animals in their own environment. It's a very belittling sleight of hand.
Well, the pygmies eat monkey meat. That's part of their staple diet, a protein. So they describe these giant spiders perfectly, and and they kill them on sight because they can be dangerous. They can attack you and envenomate you and make you very ill, or you will die, one of the two. And so, and they grow, I mean, they lay hundreds of eggs. Now, the thing about these giant spiders or any animal in the forest is the deforestation of southern Cameroon is catastrophic, in my opinion. And it means that many of these extraordinary creatures could well become extinct before we even have a chance to discover them. And so it's really tragic. And like I said, on my channel, Crypto Hunt, I put that giant spider video on there for people to look at. In fact, there's I think it was made in 1941. It was a Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan movie where he was fighting the Nazis in Africa. And one of the bad guys fell into a cave, and this big giant spider crawled out and devoured the bad guy. And I'm thinking, I wonder if they based that on reports they might have heard sometime ago.
There must have been some sort of reports around that time.
Right.
I mean, it's amazing to me. A lot of people find it hard, from a scientific point of view, to justify an arachnid being able to attain that size, because of its oxygen needs. That's always something that's put forward. But is there something about the environment of the Congo that could supercharge such a creature to attain such a size and to maintain it as well?
Things there seem to grow bigger. Insects grow bigger. You got the Goliath frog, which is really massive. They report on giant crocodiles there and all kinds of outsized creatures, insects that grow bigger and so on. And it's because it's such a hot and humid and swampy environment. There's, like I said, all kinds of things could be living there we know nothing about. But yeah, there has been questions raised about how a spider can attain that size. But I did consult Carl Schuker, the famous zoologist, on this. And he was telling me that spiders have book lungs, which does not restrict their size. So they can grow bigger. And someone even suggested to me that perhaps what people were seeing were spider crabs, but they don't live anywhere close to the Congo Basin, or coconut crabs. And on my channel, I had a clip of a coconut crab killing and devouring a seabird, a seagull.
Yeah.
So but these seem to me to be 8-legged arachnids. They're gigantic in size. They live in the forest, and they've been observed by white people. The same with the mystery ape called the dode or dodu, which is a very tall, powerful ape-like creature that can walk on 2 legs. It has long head hair, much like a human being. The pygmies say that it has head hair like a white woman. And they say this thing is so ferocious that it attacks gorillas on sight. And we did get one eyewitness report from a plantation owner in Cameroon who witnessed a dode and a male gorilla battling it out with each other. He got pretty scared and disappeared quick. He didn't want to see who won.
Yeah.
A bit like Mokele Mbembe, like we had a report from 1936, a Frenchman working in, he was up in the upper Sangha River, and he was out hunting with some Congolese guides, and they witnessed a Mokele Mbembe battling a hippo. And Mokele was lashing a crocodile. And the Mokele was hitting the crocodile with his tail, and the crocodile eventually slithered away. Coming up to 2010, we have reports of a Frenchman and a South African working in Wesso in the northern Congo. I've been there before, right on the Sangha River, and they were working, repairing telecommunications equipment. And they're walking along the river one morning, just enjoying the morning sun. And out about 100 or so yards out into the river, there's a small, heavily forested island. And they saw the back end of a creature, a large animal that looked like it was foraging around. And they said that the body was bigger than a hippo. They saw the rear legs, short and stubby, and a long, long tail swinging back and forth. And they tried to get a closer look at it, but the animal was obviously looking or foraging for food, and it moved into the island. Later on, they mentioned this to some of their Congolese colleagues, and they said, "Oh, you must have seen a Mokele Mbembe," because that area surrounding that island was heavily populated by hippos. but this particular Mokele Mbembe showed up and chased all the hippos away. So whatever these Mokele Mbembes are, they are very ferocious animals, very dangerous. They're able to easily, kill hippos and crocodiles and anything. So and this is why they say when you see one in the river, you do make a wide berth, because otherwise it could attack and upend the canoe.
So let's just say they're very territorial animals. Are they often seen in groups of more than one in that case? Because they also seem to be solitary. The sightings are normally of individuals. Is that correct? And do you think that ties into their territoriality?
Well, I think we've had a few scattered reports here and there. Like, for example, in the Congo in 1960, according to the two elderly pygmy eyewitnesses in Mfondo, when one of the animals was being speared to death by the Bangombe pygmies in the north end of Lake Tele, there was about 3 of them, 2 large ones and a smaller one, a juvenile. And one of the adults, the juvenile, retreated in the swamp while the first one was being killed by the pygmies. The Baka pygmies of Cameroon tell us that they see them occasionally, 2 adults and a calf, a young one. And in fact, when Peter Beach, who's a microbiologist from, he's from, let me see, it's a city in the west coast of the United States, but Portland, Oregon. And so when Peter Beach from Portland, Oregon, and Brian Sass from Regina in Saskatchewan went back in 2004, February 2004, when we were there in November 2003, the water level was very high. Now, at the time, the water level was going down because it was approaching the dry season. Unfortunately for us, some late rains came along and filled the lake up again, because you could see the tips of the caves where the locals said some Mokele Mbembes were still, or Lakila-mbembes were still living. And as we were paddling against the current going north on the river through this narrow channel of an area they called the Forbidden Zone, because they don't go there because of these animals, a big head popped out of the water and a neck and moving along. And because our boatmen are standing up in the canoe and we're sitting down to maintain balance, they started shouting and pointing ahead of us. And so Pierre, who was with us, stood up in the canoe, and he said what he could see was a head shaped roughly like an American football, attached to a long neck that was sticking 3 feet out of the water, and it was moving along. But as soon as the sound of our voices reached this animal, it dipped his head under. Now, this could not have been a snake or a lizard or a turtle, anything like that, because we were paddling against a strong current, and that current would have affected any smaller animal swimming. It would have brought them towards us. So our guide said this animal was walking along the bottom.
Wow.
And and there was a cave on the Congo side of the river, and there was a cave on this island on the Cameroon side of the river. This is in the Jar River. And when Brian Sass and Peter Beach went back in February 2000, the water level had dropped right down to a few feet, and there was a branch or remains of a tree that was kind of sticking out of the water at the time. And they were able to measure the height of the river, or the depth of the river at the time we saw this head and neck, and it was 20 feet.
Wow.
So whatever this creature was walking across the river, it was walking through 20 feet of river, and its head was still able to come out of the water.
Wow.
Amazing. And so when they examined the area around the island, they found massive footprints pressed deep into the mud. Now, Pierre Sima is a seasoned elephant tracker. He'd actually take tourists through the forest to track elephants for them so they can film them and so on. And he said these prints were bigger than an elephant would make, and they were very, very deep. And they were able to determine there was 2 adults and 1 small animal that were moving around, and the foliage, the leaves and fruits, were stripped from the branches of the trees to a height of 18 feet. So these were very large, very powerful animals. And I should mention there are no elephants in this area. There are no giraffes in this area. Giraffes are savanna animals. And so when we were exploring this one area, every day, we had trouble trying to find the same boatman to take us all the time. We had to keep hiring different people because they were just getting spooked because this one channel between the Congo side and the Cameroon side, they would put their fishing nets up there and then they'd go back and find something had torn the nets up.
Really want to ask you about is your conclusions about the taxonomic identity of animals like the Mokele Mbembe or the I think you mentioned the Emele Ntouka, what you think that is. But yes, there's a lot of talk about living diplodocus or some kind of sauropod. But people will ask, how is this possible? How could this creature still be around to this very day? Is that where your theories lie on the identity of the creature, or have you got something else in mind?
Well, okay, well, look at it this way. The tuatara lizard of New Zealand is a very ancient reptile. If you believe in the evolutionary theory, personally, I question it. But the tuatara lizard, according to the fossil record, was around before and after whatever it was that killed off the dinosaurs. I found that intriguing. Now, this animal only lays its eggs every 20 years. And according to the Baka people, the Mokele Mbembe or Lakila-mbembes only breed once every 20 years. So this is a very old reptilian form. I mean, I've spoken to zoologists who were open to discussing this, and they all say, well, the long neck and small lizard-like head and the long tail tells us that it's a reptile of some kind. But they won't commit to any further than that. So what we're dealing with here is either a living dinosaur that's kind of broken all the rules of paleontology. It's a semi-aquatic sauropod, or it's a semi-aquatic sauropod, or it's something completely new to science that looks like a dinosaur. Either way, we'll never know that until we actually at least get some crystal clear digital footage that zoologists can study and extract some sort of accurate zoological data. As far as the horned animals are concerned, the Congo, the Aka people of the Congo only speak of the one animal with the big polished nasal horn, ivory horn, and its habit of ambushing elephants and canoes and everything. This could, as Roy Mackall has postulated, could well be an unknown species of aquatic rhino, which is very possible. In Cameroon, however, when they talk about these big horn things with neck frills and armored bodies and living in the savannah, and that they sound to me a lot like the horned dinosaurs. However, having said that, again, it could be a hitherto unknown species of armored rhino. We just don't know at this point. But when we ask the Baka people to draw images of these creatures on the ground for us, which they do, and we go to different locations and we look for eyewitnesses, and before we start showing them nice color pictures of dinosaurs, we ask them, first of all, draw an image of the animals that you're familiar with. And they do that, and it's consistent throughout. It's sauropodian with armored body and dermal spikes and long neck, long tail, big clawed feet. And those footprints have been found by Michel below. Or it's these heavy four-legged beasts with multiple horns and neck frills and everything else. We do know that whatever these animals are, they are very rare. So the challenge is finding one and filming one. The Lakila-mbembes have never been killed as far as the Baka people are concerned. You couldn't kill one if your life depended on it, But whereas in Congo, the smaller, smooth-kin Mokele Mbembes can be speared, can be killed with spears and what have you. So this is very intriguing. Same with the giant spiders. They live in the forest. They're rare. They're encountered from time to time, and when the people encounter them, they kill them straight away because they're a menace. And it's the same with they see giant crocodiles very occasionally. I think there's one crocodile somewhere.
This is the Mahamba?
The Mahamba, yeah. Now, we do have some early reports of explorers from the 20s and 30s saying that they've seen crocodiles 40, 50 feet long, And, but I think right now in Southern Africa somewhere, the herpetologists are all agog about a crocodile they call Gustav, which is
Mm.
about 16, between 16 and 18 feet. But when Michel Bellot went to one of his Cameroonian trips, they actually photographed a crocodile 16 feet long. Pierre Sima told me that when he was trekking through the forest and they had to cross a shallow part of the river, they found the skeletal remains or the desiccated remains of a dead crocodile on a sandbank, and the bones would have been scattered around. But when they put all the bones together, it measured out to be about 30 feet. So
Wow.
there are some very big, again rare, but big crocs are still around, and they could be just as hazardous as
Well,
anything. But
yeah, big and little. Yeah, absolutely.
you
Now,
never see hippos there, so that's an interesting thing.
I mean, that is very interesting because that's such an aggressive animal, and to have another animal that could scare, a herd of hippos off. I mean, I think that's quite significant. Now, we talked briefly before this interview. We had a little chat, and you mentioned that you now live in Canada, that you're not too far from Lake Okanagan,
Right.
and that you may have had a cryptid encounter there in the lake. Tell us a bit about that.
About 2013, I went to Lake Okanagan with my late wife was with me at the time, my youngest son Andrew, and we went there to meet David Wetzel and his wife Gloria and their children. And we were chatting, and we were staying at the Lake Okanagan Resort, and we were having a dinner together and everything. And Dave said, "Oh, let's go and rent a boat and go out on the lake," just out of the blue. And so, okay, so we went down to the jetty, and you can rent a boat for a few hours. It's a nice twin-hulled pontoon with a nice sun, like a screen
Oh yeah.
cover, and
Uh-huh.
yeah, we went out in the lake, and he said, "Okay, go this way." So okay, so we're going up the lake, and then after about 10 minutes, it stopped at this point, and I said, "Why?" He said, "Well, this is an Ogo Pogo hotspot." Of course, I didn't expect anything was going to happen, and so we were sitting there for a while, and just after a couple of minutes, we saw fish leaping out of the water in every direction. This was about, I'd say, 10, 15 feet away from the front of our boat. And I've seen this before as a fisherman. When a predator comes after smaller fish, they scatter. And the fish were leaping out all over the place. And I said, I brought Dave's attention, look at this. And before you know it, these three big humps just came right out of the water. Big, massive humps. And there was three humps, and I think my son Andrew thought he might have seen the head of the Ogopogo just poking out of the water. It's sort of an oblong shaped head with a very big eye, and people have described that to us before when they report that obviously this animal is a deep diver, and to me it's probably a fish eater, so it hunts for the larger fish down in the depths. But those big humps, they were very dark in color, perhaps a very dark greeny color, and you could see this ridge running the length of the humps. And just after a couple of minutes, when we kind of gathered our senses, it began to move forward, and then it slowly sank out of sight, and it left this massive wave behind it. And Dave whipped out his camcorder and filmed it. It was practically gone and just left this massive wave. Now, last year, in September last year, just for a break, I went to Lake Okanagan again to meet my old friend John Kirk. John and I had been to Africa together a couple of times. And again, we went out on a boat, and this was late September. Apparently, the best time of year to see an Ogopogo, when they're most active, is I think late September through to October, and that sounds like it might be part of their reproductive cycle. But we did see some large objects briefly breaking the water or swimming just under the surface, causing these massive wakes, and we got a little bit of footage and some photographs of that. What we need is to take more specialized equipment. So my plan is to go next year with a deep diving ROV, remote operating vehicle, with a 4K camera, goes down 150 meters, use a fish camera that we can suspend under the boat for 50 feet or more, and a waterproof drone, again with a high resolution 4K camera that we can fly over any disturbance in the water, because when you film one of these animals moving through the water, and some good footage has been taken at Lake Okanagan and Lake Shuswap, which is only about an hour and a half drive away. And you see these serpentine forms going through the water. Critics easily dismiss that as just being unusual waves, or two waves coming together and creating this pattern. Yeah. But if we have that high quality drone, and in this case I have a waterproof drone, that you can fly over the disturbance and film downwards, sorry, my cat just got on the way. To film downwards, then you can get a good look at what is breaking the surface of the water and moving along. So this interests me is the Ogopogo of Lake Okanagan. The same animal, I believe, inhabits Lake Shuswap. And possibly maybe later on we can go to the west coast. And we can perhaps do a little bit of Cadborosaurus research as well.
Wow. It sounds amazing. Lake monsters have always been, I suppose, my introduction and my favorite part of cryptozoology. And the Ogopogo, I thought Arlene's, I think I got a really old copy of one of Arlene Gull's books, actually. Still, it's in its treasured position. It would be a real dream. And I think you're very lucky, strangely, after all of those expeditions to faraway places to search for mystery creatures, to find one at home. So yeah, that's.
Well, I saw something in the UK when I was there back in I think 88, 89. I was living in Kent, and I was working at a very large supply depot in Faversham in Kent. It was, and I was actually supervising the security team there, and we were getting reports of rabbits being found ripped to pieces and everything, and people said they were seeing these very large black cats stalking the undergrowth, and so as it happens, there was a lot of rough ground around the depot, and we picked up on one of the security cameras a very large black cat that was slowly stalking rabbits. And they didn't seem to be that scared of people, because when I was driving to work, I spotted one of them inside the chain link fence of another facility. So I pulled to the side of the road, and just looked across the fence, and there was this huge black cat just sitting on a couple of packing cases, that were, just sleeping. And well, it woke up and looked at me, and it was about 4 times the size of the biggest domestic cat that I could tell you about. And so I've seen them. I saw these big black predatory cats that you see commonly in Kent. And of course, I've seen the Ogopogo back in 2002, I think, or 2003, when I was down in Oklahoma at the Kiamichi Mountains near a town called Hanobi. I know a couple of brothers there who do Bigfoot research.
Oh, yeah.
And we would hear the screams at night, these high-pitched vocalizations that you couldn't really match to anything else. We went up on a game trail the next morning up in the mountains, and we found footprints like this big, and whatever this was, and they say Bigfoot. It was obviously following or moving up the game trails, probably following deer, because they seem to like deer. So, and they found deer carcasses with the livers missing.
Wow.
For some reason, and there's been reports in that area occasionally of dogmen and things like that. Talking about dogmen, of course, sadly we lost Linda Godfrey.
Yes.
A couple of days ago. I never met Linda. I spoke to her a few times on the phone. We swapped books. I got a couple of her books autographed.
She was
Yeah, she was a really lovely lady. And
she was, just for somebody so popular to have that level of time for every individual she met, I think that's very unusual.
Well, she invited me down to her neck of the woods to do some dogman research, and of course, the thing that kind of put a block on all my expeditions was the fact that when my wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer in 2018, and of course I sold my business. I had a very good company at the time, that I was building up. I owned a security guard service. We had
Oh yes.
127 employees. I was doing really well, and then that allowed me the freedom to travel and do research because I didn't need to ask permission from an employer. I could just go
That always helps.
and leave the manager look after the company. But
Yeah.
I mean, I sold the company and just stayed with my wife, who passed away in January last year. And since then, I've just kind of been, deciding what I'm going to do now for the future. So, but I'd very much like to go back to Africa, but right now there's a lot of unrest, as they say, in southern Cameroon, where all the research is done. There's a couple of rebel groups active now in Cameroon, and the southeast province was where this breakaway English-speaking group has been trying. What they're trying to do is they're trying to annex southern Cameroon.
Okay.
And northern Cameroon. So they want southern Cameroon to be French-speaking and northern Cameroon to be English-speaking.
Okay.
And so, but that rebel group have now expanded their operations, as it were, into southeast Cameroon, where we do our research. And so they obviously, if you're a foreigner and you're in that area, the chances are, you could be abducted, held for ransom, whatever the case might be.
What's it like on the DRC Congo side? Is it the same situation still?
Congo side is, as far as I know, is relatively stable. But wherever you go in that area now, you need to take some armed protection with you. Like my friend Michel below, he takes at least one or two armed police officers and a couple of the what they call the eco guards, ecology guards, that are employed by the World Wildlife Fund. And by the way, a couple of those guards have encountered that giant ape, the dodo, in the forest. And
that's very interesting to me, the dodo. And it's very unexpected when I started looking to the subject to find so many mystery ape sightings throughout Africa.
Well, there is, I believe, a mystery ape in Sumatra or somewhere where anthropologists take seriously. The orangutan or something. But the mystery ape in Cameroon, they don't seem to take very seriously. I don't know why. But I think the main criticism we get from the scientific world is, well, no serious scientist goes and looks for these creatures. It's left to creationists. Well, yeah, but what if we find something? What if we film something? Then they'll accuse us of faking the film. Sometimes you can't win with these people. But if you're doing something closer to home, like Lake Okanagan or Lake Shuswap or Cadbrosaurus, I mean, I believe the technology we have at our disposal now will really make the difference.
It's getting very serious. Yeah, I mean, of course, there's the eDNA side as well, which can be very handy in many cases. And
yes.
Although it's sort of not having the DNA of the thing you're looking for on file is problematic. Nobody really talks about that aspect of it.
Well, it's very true.
Yeah.
But I understand that recently in Loch Ness, there have been more sightings of odd things on the surface. Also, one of Tim Dinsdale's sons went on a TV show where they took some divers to Loch Ness and they picked something up in the sonar, a very large creature resting on a shelf under the water, and the divers went down. And while there's very poor visibility in Loch Ness, they did encounter a very, very large creature that quickly vacated the area and swam into the depths as the divers approached with their big spotlights. But I always think that you're probably better off going to Loch Morar, because you got Morag there. Loch Morar is the water's very clear. It's not as murky as Loch Ness, and I'm told that would be, even Bernard Heuvelmans once told me, don't bother with Loch Ness, because he's dived there twice and said you can't see anything down there. Why don't you go to Loch Morar, because you'll have much better chances of observing something interesting. And that's how I believe that top of the range sonar, underwater ROVs with top-notch cameras and drones could very well bring back the goods for us. If you film something extraordinary using the very best of equipment, then that certainly would advance the research. But I would also like to go to other places like Lake Champlain.
It's beautiful. I've been there. Very beautiful lake.
Yes, very big too, I understand,
Mm.
and also maybe Lake Memphremagog in Quebec, where people see a similar large animal there. So there's lots of homegrown cryptozoology mysteries to explore.
Oh, I mean, that's right on your doorstep. You're in prime cryptid territory there, William, I think, and I'm slightly envious. You know, apart from the beauty, the beautiful environment on all sides everywhere in Canada. You know, it's a very pristine place in many respects, I think.
Yes,
You have a whole host of mystery animals that you could just uh, travel to find nearby without having to delve into the swamps of the Congo and the jungles
that's
of
right.
South
That's
America.
right.
One thing I wanted to ask you before we finish is just what's in store for you coming up next year. And I usually have some expeditions planned, possibly, and to Lake Okanagan and elsewhere. But where can people find your work? Where can they find the videos, the books?
Okay,
What's
right.
the best
Well,
way to contact you?
I have a channel on YouTube. It's called Crypto Hunt. That's two separate words,
Mhm.
and I have to start putting a few new presentations on there. And I'm getting slightly better at making videos now because I'm a techno dinosaur. So,
Thank-
I'm using a very user-friendly video editing software, and it's helping me to improve the quality of presentations each time I put one up. So, and I use a lot of things like stock footage and all that kind of thing. Crypto Hunt is my YouTube channel, and my books. I haven't written one since 2010, but if you want the Mokele Mbembe book, Mokele Mbembe, Mystery Beast of the Congo Basin, you can find that on Amazon. And I also like to just pay a little bit of a tribute to Linda Godfrey
Mm.
and also to Arlene Gall.
Yes.
She was the foremost journalist and investigator
Mm.
into the Ogopogo. And I met her years ago. She invited me to her home and we swapped
Wow.
a couple of books, and she was a lovely, lovely lady.
Mm.
And going way back to 1986, after I came back from the Congo the first time, I was Tim Dinsdale invited me to his house, and we sat and talked for hours. And it was so nice to have met these pioneers
Mm.
of cryptozoology and having known them personally,
And what a
and met them.
start in the genre, William, to meet what really were the greatest movers and trailblazers of this genre. It's a golden age that I don't think will ever be repeated again, this
No,
genre.
well,
And you got
I
to
think
see it
we're really
firsthand.
standing. Well, we're really standing on their shoulders, aren't we?
Mm.
But
Absolutely.
I did say one day if we find Mokele Mbembe, we'll name it after Roy Mackal.
Yes.
If we find the Dode, the mystery ape, we would name it after Bernard Heuvelmans because he was very big on cryptid apes. If we do get Ogopogo officially recognized, we will name it after Arlene Gall.
Mm.
I think they are far more deserving than me of having new major species named after them.
Well, with that in mind, and we could call it the Mokele Mbembe, by the way. Sorry for the terrible pun.
Mokele Mbembe.
Uh, I mean, after Roy Mackal. And yeah, well, look, thank you very much for such an informative debriefing, as we said, of your time in cryptozoology. I've enjoyed your work for years and years and years and
Well,
learned so
thank you.
much from it. And I've really appreciated this chat. It's kind of it's off a tick off my bucket list. So thank you, Ian.
Well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you again, Andy. Well, we'll
Thank you
talk
so much.
again. I'm sure we'll talk again in the future.
Very soon, I hope. Take care.
Indeed.
Bye.
Take care. Bye bye.